For 3 years, the small wooden house at the edge of town heard screams. No one came to answer. The walls were thin, the windows cracked, and the floorboards carried the memory of fists, insults, and silent tears. Inside lived a woman named Elena. Though very few people remembered her name anymore, to the neighbors she was just that quiet woman. To the town, she barely existed. And to the man who shared the house with her, she was not a wife but a possession. Every morning began the same way: fear before sunlight, pain before breakfast, silence before survival. Elena learned how to move quietly, how to breathe without being noticed, how to hide bruises under long sleeves even in summer. She learned that flinching invited anger and speaking invited worse. 3 years earlier, she had walked into that house believing love could be saved. 3 years later, she stayed because she believed she couldn't be saved at all. The beatings never started loudly. They never do. They began with words, sharp, poisonous words that cut deeper than fists. "You're useless. You're lucky I keep you. No, one would want you." At first, Elena argued. Then she cried. Then she learned the safest response was silence. Silence became her armor, though it never truly protected her. Some nights, she slept on the floor because the bed felt like a battlefield. Other nights, she stared at the ceiling, counting cracks, pretending she was somewhere else, anywhere else. She used to dream of open fields and fresh air, of horses running freely beneath a wide sky. She didn't know why those dreams came, only that they hurt more than the bruises when she woke up. Once long ago, Elena had been bright. She laughed easily. She believed people were mostly good. That girl slowly disappeared, piece by piece. Each time she was told she was nothing. The town didn't ask questions. Abuse has a way of hiding in plain sight, and Elena became very good at pretending. She smiled when she had to. She said she was fine because that word was easier than the truth. And after a while, she started believing the lie herself, that this was all she deserved. The night everything began to change did not arrive with thunder or warning. It arrived quietly, carried on the sound of boots against wood. Elena was sitting on the kitchen floor, her back against the cabinet, holding a bag of frozen peas to her face. Her husband had stormed out minutes earlier, slamming the door so hard a picture fell from the wall. She didn't cry anymore when he left. Crying wasted energy she needed just to exist. Her body ached, but worse than the pain was the numbness. She wondered, not for the first time, if disappearing would be easier than surviving another day. Then came the knock. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't demanding. Just 3 firm knocks, steady, calm, unfamiliar. Elena froze. No one knocked on their door. No one ever came. Fear rushed through her like ice. Had he forgotten something? Had he come back angrier? She didn't move. The knock came again, slower this time. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. "Hello?" A man's voice called out. Deep, controlled, not drunk, not cruel. Elena's heart pounded. She crawled to her feet, every instinct screaming to stay hidden. She opened the door just enough to see him, and for a moment, she thought she was imagining things. The man standing on her porch looked like he had stepped out of another world, tall, broad-shouldered, a weathered cowboy hat, shadowed kind but serious eyes. His jacket was dusty, his boots worn by honest work, not rage. Behind him stood a pickup truck, and in the distance, the faint outline of open land stretched beyond the road. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said gently. "Your fence down the road's fallen onto my property. I thought I should let you know." Elena couldn't speak. No one had ever spoken to her gently in this house. Her face was bruised, her lips split, her hands shaking, and he saw it. His eyes flickered, just for a second, but in that second, everything changed. There was no judgment in his stare. No pity, just recognition, like he understood something without needing it explained. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked quietly. The question shattered something inside her. Not because it was loud, but because it was kind. Elena opened her mouth, and the lie she had practiced for years nearly came out. "I'm fine," but this time it stuck in her throat. Tears burned her eyes, and she hated herself for it. She nodded anyway, because nodding was safer than truth. The cowboy didn't push. He simply tipped his hat slightly. "If you need help fixing that fence, I'll be around tomorrow," he said. "Name's Caleb." As he turned to leave, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. It terrified her more than the abuse ever had. The door closed softly after the cowboy left, but the silence he left behind was louder than any scream Elena had ever heard. She stood there for a long time, her hand still resting on the wood, her body trembling not from fear this time, but from confusion. Kindness felt unfamiliar, almost dangerous. For 3 years, every man's voice had meant control or cruelty. Yet the way Caleb had spoken, slow, respectful, unhurried, had stirred something buried deep inside her. She hated herself for feeling it. Hope had always been followed by pain. Always. She locked the door, slid down against it, and pressed her forehead to her knees, whispering to herself that it meant nothing. Just a stranger, just a fence, just one moment that would pass like all the others. But that night, sleep refused to come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the cowboy's face, not as a rescuer, not as a hero, but as a reminder that another kind of life existed somewhere beyond those walls. The thought hurt more than the bruises on her ribs. At dawn, she rose quietly, moving through the house like a ghost. She cleaned the kitchen, washed the blood from her lip, changed into long sleeves again. The time her husband returned, she looked the way he preferred her to look, small, quiet, invisible. He barely noticed her as he grabbed coffee and complained about the world. He never noticed her anyway. Abuse had taught him that she would always stay. Later that morning, Elena heard a truck outside. Her heart dropped. She peeked through the cracked curtain and saw Caleb parked near the fallen fence, tools laid out neatly beside him. He worked alone, calm and focused, like a man used to fixing things instead of breaking them. For a moment, Elena just watched. No one had ever come back for her before. She told herself he was only doing it because it affected his land. She told herself it had nothing to do with her bruises. Still, she stepped outside, her legs shaking with each step. "You don't have to do that," she said softly, her voice rusty from disuse. Caleb looked up, surprised but not annoyed. "It's no trouble," he replied. "Fence'll hold better if I reinforce it." He paused, then added gently, "You shouldn't have to worry about things falling apart on you." The words landed heavier than he knew. Elena swallowed hard. She nodded, unsure how to respond. They worked in silence for a while, the sound of hammer against wood filling the space where fear usually lived. For the first time in years, Elena felt useful just by standing there, handing him nails, holding planks steady. When he finished, Caleb wiped his hands and looked at her carefully. "I don't want to cross a line," he said slowly, "but if someone's hurting you, you don't deserve it." Her chest tightened. Her instinct screamed to deny it, to protect the secret that had become her prison. But something in his tone told her he wasn't asking for details, just offering truth. Tears welled up despite her effort to stop them. She shook her head, more in habit than refusal. Caleb didn't push. "If you ever need help," he said, "my ranch is 2 miles west. Door's always open." That was when a truck engine roared down the road. Elena's husband was coming back early. Panic exploded through her body. She stepped back, shaking. "You should go," she whispered urgently. "Please." Caleb followed her gaze, understanding flashing across his face. He picked up his tools calmly, but his eyes hardened, not with anger, but with resolve. As the truck pulled in, Elena's husband jumped out, already scowling. His eyes went straight to Caleb. "Who the hell are you?" he snapped. Caleb stood tall. "Name's Caleb. Fence fell onto my land. Just fixing it." The husband sneered, looking Elena up and down like she was an object. "Did you invite him?" Elena stayed silent. Silence was survival. Caleb noticed the way she flinched. Not dramatically, just enough. And in that small movement, he saw 3 years of fear written clearly. His voice stayed even. "Fence is fixed. I'm heading out." As he walked away, the husband grabbed Elena's arm painfully and dragged her inside. The door slammed. The shouting started. The blows followed. But something was different now. As Elena lay on the floor later, her body aching, she stared at the door and realized the truth. Someone knew. Someone had seen. And somewhere 2 miles west, a cowboy was thinking about a woman who didn't deserve the hell she was trapped in. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Elena made a quiet decision. She wouldn't die in that house. Not anymore. Elena waited 3 days before she ran. Not because she lacked courage, but because courage had to be planned. When fear ruled every breath. Those 3 days felt longer than the 3 years before them. Every sound made her flinch. Every footstep felt like a countdown. Her husband sensed something had shifted, even if he didn't understand what. He grew more controlling, more watchful, as if the walls themselves had whispered to him that his hold was slipping. Elena said little, obeyed more, and hid what little strength she had left deep inside her chest, protecting it like a fragile flame in the wind. On the fourth night, he passed out drunk on the couch. The house smelled of anger and cheap alcohol. Elena stood in the doorway of the bedroom, staring at the small bag she had packed days earlier, just clothes, documents, and the last photograph of herself before the bruises. Her hands shook so badly she had to sit down. Leaving didn't feel brave. It felt terrifying, but staying felt like a slow death. She moved quietly, every step measured, every breath held. When she opened the door, the night air hit her face like freedom she wasn't sure she deserved. She didn't look back. Some doors should never be reopened. The road to the west was dark, lit only by the moon and the pounding of her heart. Every passing car made her duck into the shadows. When she finally saw the outline of the ranch, wide land stretching beneath the sky, a single house glowing softly in the distance, her legs nearly gave out. She didn't knock. She couldn't. She stood on the porch, frozen, convinced she had made a mistake. That kindness was a lie she had imagined. Then the door opened. Caleb stood there, half asleep, wearing a worn shirt and concern on his face that sharpened the moment he saw her. He didn't ask why she was there. He didn't ask questions she couldn't answer. He simply stepped aside and said the words that changed her life. "You're safe here." Elena collapsed, not dramatically, not loudly, but like someone who had finally been allowed to stop fighting gravity. Caleb caught her before she hit the floor, his grip firm and steady. There was no rush, no panic in his movements, just certainty. He helped her to a chair, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and placed a cup of water in her shaking hands. He sat across from her, not too close, not too far. "You don't have to explain tonight," he said softly. Those words broke her. She cried then, not the quiet crying she had mastered, but deep, ragged sobs that shook her entire body. Years of fear poured out without words. Caleb didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix her with sentences. He just stayed. And for the first time in 3 years, Elena wasn't alone in the dark. The next morning, sunlight filled the ranch like a promise. Birds sang. Horses moved calmly across the fields. Elena woke in a clean bed, disoriented by the absence of pain. For a moment, panic surged. Then, she remembered where she was. Safe. The word felt unreal on her tongue. Caleb had left fresh, clothes folded neatly on a chair, and breakfast, waiting in the kitchen. No demands, no expectations, just space. But safety has a price when escape is involved. By noon, a truck pulled onto the road. Elena saw it from the window and felt her blood turn to ice. She knew that truck. She knew the way it moved, the sound of its engine, the violence it carried. Her husband had found her. She backed away, breath shallow, terror threatening to swallow her whole. Caleb noticed immediately. He didn't ask. He looked out the window once, then turned to her, calm and grounded. "Go to the back room," he said. "Lock the door." "I don't want you hurt," she whispered. Caleb met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw something unbreakable there. "You're not responsible for his choices." The knock came hard, angry, demanding. Caleb opened the door before it could be kicked in. The confrontation was brief but heavy with tension. Her husband shouted, threatened, claimed ownership. Caleb didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He simply stood his ground, a wall between violence and the woman it had nearly destroyed. When the man tried to push past him, Caleb stopped him with a single firm movement and a warning that carried the weight of law, witnesses, and consequences. "You leave," Caleb said, "or this gets handled the right way." For the first time, the abuser hesitated, and in that hesitation, power shifted. The truck left in a cloud of dust, rage unsatisfied but blocked. Elena slid down the wall, shaking, not from fear this time, but from the shock of survival. Caleb closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just turned to her and said, "It's not over yet." "But you're not facing it alone." That night, as Elena stared out at the open land, she realized something profound. Rescue wasn't about being saved. It was about being believed. The days that followed were quiet, but not peaceful, not yet. Safety, Elena learned, did not instantly erase fear. It simply gave fear room to loosen its grip. Every sudden sound still made her tense. Every shadow still carried memory. But the ranch remained steady, grounded in routines that didn't change with moods or violence. Caleb woke before sunrise, worked the land with patience, spoke only when words were needed. He never hovered, never questioned her worth. He treated her presence not as a burden, but as something natural, like the wind passing through open fields. Slowly, Elena began to breathe again. Legal steps came next. They were hard. Reliving the truth always is. Caleb drove her to town, sat nearby, not holding her hand, not speaking for her, just there. When Elena finally told her story out loud, her voice shook, but it didn't break. Bruises faded. Records remained. For the first time, her suffering was written down, acknowledged, believed. A restraining order followed. Then consequences. Her husband raged, denied, blamed, but his power was gone. Abuse depends on silence, and Elena had found her voice. Healing was not dramatic. It came quietly in small moments. In mornings without fear. In meals eaten slowly. In laughter that surprised her because it sounded like someone else at first. She helped around the ranch when she felt strong enough. Learned the names of the horses. Discovered that her hands, once used only to protect her face, could build, care, and create. Caleb never rushed her. Never called what he did saving. He understood something important. Real strength isn't taking control. It's giving it back. One evening, months later, they sat on the porch watching the sky turn gold. Elena spoke without looking at him. "I used to think love meant endurance," she said quietly. "That if I stayed long enough, it would change." Caleb nodded. "Real love doesn't ask you to disappear." She smiled then. Not wide, not perfect, but real. The kind that comes from truth. The future didn't arrive as a fairy tale. It arrived as choice, as boundaries, as respect, as a woman who had survived hell and refused to be defined by it. Elena didn't become strong because a cowboy walked through the door. She became strong because someone finally stood still long enough to let her remember who she was. And sometimes, that makes all the difference. A year passed and the scars. Elena carried no longer announced themselves before she entered a room. Some were still there, thin, reminders etched into skin and memory, but they no longer defined the way she stood, spoke, or breathed. Healing had reshaped her quietly. Strength came not in grand gestures, but in ordinary days lived without fear. She had her own small house now on the edge of Caleb's land, close enough to feel safe, far enough to feel free. The choice had been hers. That mattered more than anything. The town changed too, or maybe Elena simply saw it clearly for the first time. People who once looked away now nodded with respect. Some apologized. Some stayed silent. Elena no longer needed their validation. She had learned that survival did not require permission. The court case ended the way. Truth often does when it is finally heard, without drama, without mercy. Accountability replaced denial. The man who once controlled her life lost his power. In a room filled with witnesses and records he could not shout down, Elena stood tall when the verdict was read. Not victorious, just finished. On the ranch, life moved forward with steady rhythm. Horses were fed. Fences were repaired. Seasons changed. Caleb remained what he had always been, present, consistent, unassuming. He never claimed credit for Elena's strength, and that was why she trusted him. Love, she discovered, was not loud. It did not bruise. It did not demand proof of loyalty through pain. Love showed up. Love listened. Love waited. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the fields gold, Elena walked beside Caleb through the tall grass. "I used to think rescue meant someone carrying you away," she said softly. "Now I know it means someone walking beside you while you learn how to stand." Caleb smiled, tipping his hat slightly. You were standing long before I showed up." She laughed then, free, unafraid, whole. Somewhere out there, someone was still trapped in silence, believing no one would ever knock on their door. Elena knew that now, and she also knew this truth. It only takes one moment, one witness, one act of courage to change a life's direction forever. Because sometimes the door doesn't open to rescue. Sometimes it opens to choice.